Welcome back, Saddleback College Emeritus Institute. This week we're going to talk about passwords. Passwords have been around, they've been with us for a long time. We use them to protect our computer account. Maybe if you're a spy, you use it to challenge and response with somebody way back in the Cold War. I don't know what your history is, but we're still using passwords today on our computers, on our phones, everywhere. And the problem is we're still using them online where anybody in the world can get to them, and we're using them to protect most of our accounts.
Mhm.
And you put on top of that, you add a weak password. Oops, I didn't, whatever just happened, I did not mean to click that. AB, just ignore that. Um, we're still using passwords that are easy for the computers to guess and difficult for us to remember, and that leads to all kinds of problems. So let's work on making longer, unique passwords and layering our defenses. So how are we going to do that? Let's identify what we want our passwords to be like. Of course, you're not going to go back and change hundreds and hundreds of passwords, but as we make new ones, let's make them long. Let's add multi-factor. I'll go over that, and we'll look at passkeys too if we can. Think about this more of what can I do to increase my security while I'm using the web and exploring online rather than what's the history of passwords been over time and how terrible is it? So let's keep that positive approach. So some guidance that's changed over the last 15 to 20 years. We used to change our passwords all the time, maybe every 3 months or every 6 months, sometimes even every year. That's actually a bad idea. It was just randomly made up by the person that wrote the paper for the, NIST. It took a long time before he said, yeah, I thought it would be a good idea. Not a great idea. You don't need to change your passwords. They shouldn't be short passwords that are easy for you to remember. But then you have to say, well, did I put a dollar sign here and a zero there? And well, did I capitalize that? And maybe I put a lesser than or a greater than. No. Instead of having all of that complexity in a short password, just make them long. Longer passwords are better. And in the lab portion, we'll use GRC's tool to see the difference between how long would it take for a bad guy to get into a short password, which could be seconds or milliseconds, compared to a long password, which could be thousands of centuries. So we'll look at that later. And we used to memorize our passwords. I felt that maybe I was especially good at that. I had about 30 different passwords I used for my personal stuff, and I started building up my work passwords. I had 10 or 15 of those. By the time I started to mix up passwords, I realized, even way back in the 2000s, I need a better way to manage it myself. And I had built myself a password manager in a database system that I was programming in called FileMaker. To this day, I have clients using a database program that I programmed in FileMaker. Not the same one from the 2000s, but I still have companies using a corporate database manager. So that's it's interesting the way that things change. We used to have our three passwords. Remember this? You had like your good password for your bank, and then you had your email password, and then you had your throwaway password for all the junk sites.
Mhm.
Well, now we really need to have a unique, strong password for everything. And then we want to layer on top of that multi-factor or passkeys.
Why do we need it for everything? I mean, I I have my throwaway one for like, the grocery store or,
Well,
stuff that
the reason it matters to have separate unique passwords is that websites aren't always the most careful with our precious information. So let's say you go to the grocery store and they have a rewards program, and that rewards program only has your email address and your phone number and then your throwaway password. But they're not a cybersecurity firm. They're not a dedicated to protecting your information, and they get breached. They lose all of your data. And now the bad guys have your name and your phone number and your throwaway password. And so they go from the grocery store, they try it at an Etsy online shopping, they try it at other places. And since we're reusing those in this case, they might get into other websites that may let them have access to even more things than we want them to have.
Hmm.
Ideally, we wouldn't reuse passwords for our email because that's really the golden standard right now. But since we're still using our passwords as the main way to get in, oh, that system I gave you, it's called credential stuffing, where they
What's
just
that?
grab a bunch of usernames and passwords and they try them everywhere. They try
Oh,
them on Facebook, they try them on LinkedIn, they try them on all the different websites. And they use credential stuffing because it works. It works. So we need to change our passwords until security gets better. Because really, the real issue is that password authentication alone doesn't protect our data. There's too many things that can go wrong. So one of the things that goes wrong is we let people make up their own passwords. These are still some of the top passwords, even in 2026. I've got a bigger list in the forum for you from a website from a couple years ago. And sure, we get fancy and we say password 123 or password 123456, or we dance along the keyboard like you're looking at the keyboard and you say, oh, I'm going to make my password QWERTY. Who would ever guess that? Except that's what everybody does. There was probably a time when you and I also did that. And then, of course, we have the obvious words like it's the grandchild or,
password.
well, password. If you notice, it's still up there, number two.
Yeah.
But we might also use those obvious words like our dogs or our cats or family members. And maybe a bad guy in another country somewhere around the world won't guess that. But if you had somebody that knew you, they might. So, long passwords. I decided to emphasize that multiple times today because I really want to get across that I'd rather have a password that was really long and ridiculous. Let's see, I'll make this text yellow. Type it up here. Let's see if we can see this. If I make it something like Blue River Cactus Festival, well, that's a really long password. And that's going to be much better password. See if I can get back into there. Took me a second here to type in this. That's going to be better than if I said something like Blue River. Just because it's longer. And then if I really wanted to get a little more security, I could start adding some symbols. I could add your favorite year. Maybe 1968 was your favorite year of all time. In that case, you start adding things like this, and now we've got a password that is something to watch out for. Our password managers will let us know if a password has been compromised by taking a mathematical hash value and checking against the Have I Been Pwned database called the HIBP. And if it's in there, you might get a notification and you should go change the password for that. That means the bad guys have it. And when I say long passwords, of course, to most of us, that means you should have 30 or 60 characters and make it really ridiculous like that Blue River Cactus Festival. But really, you'll see 14, 15 characters. That's enough. And at 14 to 16, this says 12 to 16. 12 is the recommendation right now. At 12 to 16 characters, you could type it in if you had to, if you didn't have your password manager there. There's a downside. I make my password so secure and in the password manager, when I go to my day job, I can't log into the computer there because my password is on my phone and it's just too long and difficult to type. So I just don't log in.
Ah,
So, oh, there's our Blue River Cactus Festival right there. And there's something, maybe everyone's done this too. Replace the O with a zero. Well, the bad guys know those tricks, so let's not use them. But what's a passphrase? So a passphrase could be your favorite piece of poetry. It could be a quote from Shakespeare that you've known all your life, or a line from a movie that you really love. And then you could take maybe the first letter of each of those phrases. Sometimes people will say to be or not to be. That is the question. And go on the whole thing and use those letters. That's a good way because it's special to you. Maybe this is good for your password manager or your email. You remember this poem. It was important to you. You stood up in the fifth grade and it's the first time you memorized a poem or something, but only you know that. So you can use that to get into your email or to get into your password manager. And then the bad guys will have a hard time guessing that because it'll just be more random. And some passphrases are just long sets of random words that are real easy for me to say on the phone to you. It's like, oh, hey, this is Sable from IT. I reset your password like you asked. It is consummate attacking anthill. They say, what? Consummate attacking anthill. No spaces. Okay, got it. Thanks. And then they log in with that very secure password and change it to something else that they can be in charge of. Because I don't want to know anyone's password. When we're talking about multi-factor, that's at MFA, multi-factor authentication. Think about if you go to the ATM and you get cash. You have in your hand, you'll have the bank card, and in your mind, you'll know the PIN. So when you walk up to the ATM, as long as nobody's cloned or stolen your card, because that happens, you'll put the ATM card in, it'll verify the card, you'll type in your PIN. So there's something you have, and then there's something you know, and you can go access your account and get money. And that's a fairly secure way to do your, banking when you're out and about. Of course, it's not perfect. If it was perfect, it would be too difficult. We'd lose all the convenience. When you're really that concerned, don't have an ATM card, don't use those. For most of us, that's fine. It's the same thing with our online systems. You
what do you
go
mean
to,
by that, Sable? Like, for example.
so if there's something so you go to a website and you give it your username and password, and then it says, you set up a special secret with me, and you have that authenticator. So now you open up the app on your phone and you open up your authenticator. So you have your phone and you say, okay, the 6 digits, the time-based one-time passcode is 499598. And now the website knows that within 30 seconds, you have this device that has that secret that you added. And now you can be fairly certain that it's just you that are logging in. And there's different types of these multi-factor authentications. The newer way to do that is with a passkey. So how does our multi-factor authentication, having a Google time-based one-time password, how does that help? Or even some websites are just sending me an email now, which is really annoying. But they'll send me an email when I try to log in. And what that will help with is if somebody steals my credentials and they try to log in as me, they won't be able to log in until they either also hack my email or they steal the credentials in my time-based one-time password application or some other step. And so I think most of the time the bad guys are just going to move on to the next person that doesn't have it because the bad guys, unless they're targeting us, specifically us, directly us, they're just looking for the easy way, right? You lock your car door, they don't steal the stuff from your car, they go to the neighbor. You lock your front door, they don't come in your house, even though they could break in. Same thing. We add this additional layer, make it a little bit harder for bad guys to get in. And if we hang out for another 5 or 10 years, maybe we'll have much better security. We'll see what happens. There's different types of multi-factor. In one case, you could have a hardware key, which I meant to bring and hold up for you. There's a hardware key. I plug it into the USB port on my laptop. I have to push the button on the key. That's the highest strength. That's from something called a YubiKey.
A
That
what?
it's called a YubiKey, and that means I have to have that YubiKey in my hand in order to log in. And Apple and Google, they support that. Microsoft supports that. It's supported in different ways with different companies. Most of the time, we're using this authenticator app, like the Microsoft. I think for the college, we all have to have the Microsoft Authenticator, and then we get a code we have to type in. So that's a very strong way to go. If you get a notification on your phone that with a pop-up that says, "Do you approve?" Well, that's not as strong anymore. The bad guys have figured out how to spam you so that you'll just get those endlessly. And then if you have to have something, I guess getting a text message is better than nothing, but I wouldn't consider it really strong since our phones could become the targets. So what do we do? We got 600 application or websites that you've signed into in the last 20 years that you still have lying around somewhere. You're not going to go fix them all. I know it. You know it. Let's be honest. Make sure your email password is for your personal email. It has the best security. Whatever email you use when you log into online banking, that's the one that you want to have it be the most secure. Make sure that has the multi-factor and the best password. If you have a good password, don't change it. If you have a bad password, update it, later today or tomorrow. Make sure you write it down. Write down whatever you changed it to somewhere, or at least write down yourself a note so you could figure it out. This is nobody really wants to use hardware keys. This is a very high security. If you're working in a corporate job, you really want to have those hardware keys. For most of us, we're just going to use the Authenticator app. That's good enough. And
Okay, you couldn't use the YubiKey with your phone though, could you?
yes, you can. Yes,
I thought you
Apple
said
will.
go into a USB port.
So the iPhone and Android phones, they have the newer ones have a USB-C, and even the older ones have NFC, and you can authenticate using USB-C or NFC with a hardware authenticator for the browser to log into these services. So it's totally possible. If you're going to be the highest security, you can
Yeah,
go down
okay.
that route. Even I, who you probably know is like taking a few unnecessary extra steps, I don't really use the hardware keys. I mostly stick with the authenticator apps. And if you start getting pop-ups all the time for something like your Duo to log in, make sure you don't accidentally click accept, and you might have to go change a password or so. Just keep an eye out for that. So how do we really do this? We're going to just use a password manager. They're built in everywhere now. The password managers are pretty much all good. It's just a matter of your convenience. I like Bitwarden. It's open source. It's free. It works everywhere. If you're just using the Apple ecosystem, the password manager is fantastic. It works really well. The user experience is great. If you're on Android and Windows, you can use Chrome. It's a great experience. Google spends lots of time and money to make that secure. If you like 1Password or some other password system, as long as you use one, that's fine. And when you get really paranoid, there are even options for password managers for the really paranoid. It's fantastic.
So you said that Google is actually very good for password
Yeah,
management?
I don't prefer to use the browser to store my passwords where I'm trying to protect them from the browser, but
Mhm.
then I install a browser plugin which is almost the same. So yeah, Google's not privacy focused, but they are security focused. So
So
it's
in other words, it would be better to use Google than DuckDuckGo.
well, DuckDuckGo doesn't offer password synchronization.
Oh,
With DuckDuck,
they do
with,
have password manager.
oh, they have a password manager now. So I haven't looked into the DuckDuckGo password manager, but I have used Bitwarden with the DuckDuckGo browser in the past. So
Mhm.
that's why I like, and I used to be a LastPass user before they had a big breach. They let their security go. So I was an unhappy customer and I switched. But if you're using one of these password managers, it's a fantastic way to go. The password manager becomes the weak point. And this is where we really have to focus. Well, if you can get into your password manager online with something that a bad guy could find out, that they could guess on their own, then we're going to be in trouble. So the password manager is where you want to have the long passphrase, the secure passphrase. Make sure you have multi-factor authentication set up on that. And then you can trust your password manager to not give away all your secrets. The downside is if you lose, for some reason, you forget how to log in, you lose your notes about it, you forget, then you can no longer access the passwords in your password manager. And this is one area where I think that it might be okay to figure out. We probably have a locked drawer. You probably have a small safe at home or a safe deposit box. It's probably not a bad idea to print out some of those important passwords, like your password manager password, and put them in your binder with your living trust, or put them in the in the safe deposit box and say, and an envelope that says, in case of emergency, and they can say, oh, here's all the like bank information, here's all the password manager information, here's how to log into email, and now somebody could help you. Of course, let's hope they don't get into that information before you want them to. So password manager, multi-factor, long passwords, different passwords on every website. So what are we going to be seeing in the future? We're starting to see passkeys. And passkeys give us a nice option that helps solve the problem where you see a fake website that you think is, let's say, PayPal. I mean, it's not happening to PayPal these days, but you'll see a website that you think is PayPal, but it's really comes from a phishing email and it's a fake website, and then you enter your credentials and they log into PayPal and steal your money. Well, that particular problem doesn't happen when you use a passkey. So passkeys solve that phishing issue where you're not able to log into the wrong website. And we'll see more and more of that later on. Passkeys are a very strong private key on your device that is coupled with a public key for the website that you go to. So that's one thing we'll see more of, this various layers of logging in. For example, if you're always logged in on your computer in your same Firefox browser, then it's possible that your bank and website could develop a profile. Oh, they're logging in from that same IP address. They're logging in from that same browser they've logged in. Those signals will, in the future, they'll start helping us more and more rely on that security. One of the things that was happening with this USAA breach last year was the people would get you on the phone and convince you, they'd find a way to get you to change your password. So you'd be logged in California, then your account would log in from somewhere else in the world, and then 30 seconds later you'd log in from California again. The bank should detect that and immediately shut the account down and put you on the list to call and say, hey, what's going on? There's no way you could have logged in from two different places in the country within a minute of each other. So we're going to see more of that security on the important sites, and we'll probably see more slop as people make AI applications with no thought for security at all. All right,
Mhm.
so here's your takeaways. I've got a bunch of references for this. I'll link all of those in Canvas, and we'll stop the video here. Thanks.